Hey everybody, welcome back. Noel Casler Podcast, episode 120. I'll put it down now. I missed you guys. I had to wait for a minute. Like many of us. Last Tuesday was quite a shock. Alright, I'll put it down and I'll stop talking. Trusty McAllister. Hand-built by Roy McAllister in Gig Harbor, Maine. He would build guitars for Crosby and Jackson Browne, as you guys know, who've listened to this show before. World-class luthier. And it's my go-to guitar when I need to feel better. And we all need to feel better right now. And it's obviously been a difficult time. It's a difficult situation. There's a lot of, room for recriminations and finger pointing and all that. I don't want to get into all that. What happened. If you've listened to this podcast, you know that I tried to warn people about certain messaging and how I didn't think it was reaching who it needed to reach because the numbers weren't changing. And all these PACs kept retweeting clips of Trump all day long because it would get you a lot of attention and hits and clicks and kind of rage farming, and it made stars out of influencers, but it didn't make Democratic voters out of the electorate. And that's the problem, right? Because the people we needed to reach weren't being reached, and Trump's message was reaching them, right? And that was a big part of the problem, because you feel like you're fighting back, and everybody else is going to react to the outrage the same way you are, and that's just not how the world works. That's not how a lot of the demographic that Trump was able to exploit works. They're hearing about this stuff secondhand. They don't have time to read The Atlantic. They're not spending hours a day on Twitter, which in and of itself was a trap, and I wrote about that on my Substack this week. Elon's owned that for 2 years, okay? And it was very popular for hashtags and for PACs and for Dem influencers, but it wasn't, you were preaching to the choir. And that's why the numbers weren't moving. And people were making money off of preaching to the choir, but they weren't doing what their mission was, at least on the surface, which was trying to get people to vote Democratic. And we had one way to win, which was a massive Democratic turnout. We didn't obviously achieve that, and he had 1,000 ways to cheat. And in many ways, it was death by 1,000 cuts. There was so much voter suppression. There was so much misinformation. There were bomb threats that fell out of the news cycle that night because the story became this overwhelming landslide victory that he achieved. And, in many ways, that's true. He did achieve that. He should have been repudiated. He should have gotten 10% of the vote. But we're not a country that's thinking clearly anymore. We're a country of people that have been manipulated for decades, as I talk about on this podcast all the time. This is what I was talking about. I'm not trying to say I told you so, but this is what I meant when I was talking about the culture and that Trump had become a lifestyle brand, because I see it. I live amongst these people. I'm an hour outside of the city. This is where I went to high school. I know these people. I went to high school with people that voted for Trump. I see the guys when they come and work on the House or whatever, these Trump voters, because they felt like they were the good guys. And I think that's what Democrats didn't understand, because we would point out, and rightly so, all the injustices and the incompetence and the criminality of Trump. They didn't see that. They saw the fight guy, and that he's always got 100 flags around him, and that he does a big pageantry, show of a MAGA rally all the time and plays God Bless America. And, it's fast food patriotism is what it what it is. And that's popular. Fast food is popular, right? Like, it's cheap and easy, and it's salty and it's sweet and it's fried and it feels good if you're not giving a shit about what you're putting into your body, essentially. Right. And that's our political climate. It's one based on, misinformation and outrage and appealing to the cognitive level of 14-year-old boys. There's a reason Elon Musk sort of everything he talked about was like a 14-year-old adolescent trolling, because that's who they were going for. They were going for young men, young voters. And I would see them leading up to the election. They would always do these things on the news where there were like, interviewing college kids that were undecided voters or whatever. And whenever they'd get to the young men, invariably they'd be like, well, I like Trump because he's better on the economy, which first of all was bullshit, but they'd be like, that's my key issue. And first of all, that shouldn't have been your key issue. Your key issue should have been protecting women's rights. That's what you should have cared about. You should have cared that a fascist, Christo-fascist backed, Supreme Court had taken away the rights of women in this country to have bodily autonomy. That should have been your marching orders as young men, because real tough guys, real strong young men don't subjugate women. They don't put women below them on the human rights scale. And that's what that legislation has done. And it's created horror stories already across this country. Women have lost their lives in Texas and beyond because doctors are afraid to give them health care because some asshole legislator is a Christian. And he's not a real Christian. He's just a Christian because that's an easy way to manipulate stupid white people, right? Let's call Christianity for what it is these days. I know there's good people in the Catholic Church and lots of great followers of Christ that do good work. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about fast food Christianity, just like I'm talking about fast food patriotism, deep fried crap based on a patriarchal society, based on the idea that a white man should be a better leader than a woman of color, which is complete bullshit. Kamala Harris was as qualified as anybody has ever been, in recent history to run for that position, just as Hillary Clinton was. They both would have made fine executives, and a normal world would have been happy, to elect them, a normal country rather, right? Because you look around the world, other big, first world countries have women leaders. We've yet to have ours, besides how she served as a vice president, which was, was fine. Obviously, tactically and politically, you could, you can do a big post-mortem on this thing, and she should have probably logistically, separated herself from Biden a little more, especially on The View, as James Carville pointed out, because it was a change election. People feel like they wanted a change, and even that was fucked up, right? We wanted a change from what? We were digging out of a hole that was caused by Trump mismanaging a global pandemic, which set the world on fire in a way and shut down the economies of the entire world, right? So you had inflation because people were playing catch up. Industries were, playing catch up and getting their products out there. And a lot of the corporations were just using that as an excuse to pump up prices anyway. There's enough eggs going around. The price of eggs should not be your defining thing. And I'm not saying it's not hard for people to afford food and stuff, but, first of all, eggs aren't even good for you. I had a frittata this morning, so I'm not judging, but I'm saying, any of you guys have high cholesterol? Like, where is this country all of a sudden eggs become the most important thing? Or the price of, a gallon of gas? When you're doing your family budget, look into what a price of gas really means, right? Because the planet's on fire. We got freaking wildfires in Inwood Park in northern Manhattan yesterday, North Jersey. I went to sleep last Friday night. I could smell smoke like I lived in Southern California coming through the window. Like, that's insane for the East Coast. And people have been suffering that way in the western states for a decade. That's the price of a gallon of gas. The hurricanes that ripped through North Carolina, that's the price of a gallon of gas. We're heating up the planet. And this country produced more fossil fuels than any country has ever last year. Okay? And now Trump is the president. So you look at that alone, we're the bad guys. People don't want to accept it, but it doesn't make it not true. We're not helping the planet at this point, and we're going to make it worse. Okay. But if you even wanted to, I'm playing devil's advocate here. If you even wanted to say, gas was your defining issue, the price of gas, Biden was drilling like crazy. He wasn't super green. Right? But our messaging was bad, and they were able to sort of counter it with this cartoon kind of idiocy, drill baby drill, and we're going to deregulate everything. You know why we have regulations? Because somebody died to have that regulation in a government agency. Those things didn't just come out of the blue. They were hard fought, and people had to sacrifice to get those laws on the books, and now they're going to throw them out. They put Lee Zeldin in charge of the EPA, a 44-year-old right-wing, just bad dude from New York who's got no experience in environmental policy. He's going to gut the agency. He's going to do like Scott Pruitt did, right? I'll get into the rest of the cabinet choices in a minute, but that's, he's trolling us. Matt Gaetz is Attorney General, a guy who's, clearly out of his freaking mind and a bad dude who was about to have a really bad report drop on him concerning him paying a 17-year-old for sex, and doing coke with her. And we already know he'd walk around the floor of the House showing pictures of his conquest to his buddies. And by the way, I probably said this before on a podcast, that's a Trump move, because Trump would always try to ensnare people into his honeypots and stuff. That's why he had cameras and the plaza, and he would have these parties. As I've told you, he'd have guys come over, they'd do a couple lines, they'd go in the bedroom, he'd find out who you liked. You like redheads, you like Asian girls, I'll hook you up. And guys would end up cheating on their wives and doing this kind of stuff, and then he would own them. And I guarantee you, that's what Matt Gaetz was doing. And if you don't know what I'm referring to, some of his colleagues would talk about how he would do that on the floor of the House. He'd walk around and show them, look, I was hooking up with her last night. He was trying to find the dudes who'd be like, oh, that looks cool. Where'd you meet her? Oh, come out with me Friday. Come to the, Christian Bros, townhouse, on Capitol Hill, of which they have one, right? The right-wing conservative guys are all over D.C. under the, the banner of being Christians, doing all kinds of crazy shit on Friday and Saturday night and collecting compromise on people. What do you think Trump's hotel was, Which is another interesting thing. He doesn't own the hotel this time. So how are people going to launder money in a direct way? That'll be interesting to see how that plays out, And obviously he has all these PACs and all these other ways to get money to him, and you have Elon Musk involved. I mean, it's the worst case scenario, obviously, right? And he's not doing this stuff for show. He's on a revenge tour. He's very serious about having Matt Gaetz at EPA and having, Peter Hegseth at the Department of Defense, this anti-woke guy who wants to fire all the generals and take women out of combat leadership positions, combat positions, and take any general who's into the idea of an inclusive military and fire them. That's insane. Women are just as capable in combat as men, right? You take my place. If we got to go fight, I'm getting behind anybody who knows what they're doing and wants to fight for this country. So you're dishonoring the sacrifice of already generations of women. I think it was 2006, or I'm not remember exactly when they were moved into combat roles, but they've already shown their heroism. Tammy Duckworth comes to mind. So that's just stupid, right? It doesn't matter whether you have a dick, to pull a trigger, So just stop that stupid nonsense. You want anybody who's willing to serve, serving, and to have a white man, a corrupt dude, in charge of the Department of Defense is going to continue the worst aspects of our military. All the racism that exists. There's a reason all these Green Beret Special Forces guys are always white dudes, right? Because it's a ladder to political expediency when you leave, and it's the elite part of the military. So they're always segregating the good jobs in the military. And most of the people who are serving are Latino, or a good percentage of them, Latino, minorities and stuff. That's who makes this country run, and they're attacking them. now in the military. They're attacking them in civic life. They ran on it, and they won, more votes than they did last time from that demographic, from Latino Americans, which is insane. But it shows what I was saying earlier, how our messaging isn't work and the lies are. Whoever lies the loudest wins. If I had any kind of mantra, it was that I would repeat on social media, because I see it. I see how Trump has only gotten stronger because he's an industry and he knows people are going to make money off of him, just like the MSNBC was doing and all that, all the networks. And I'm not trying to diss them. They're doing their jobs. I didn't want any part of it. I said no to them again the last week of the election. Somebody I do like who hosts the show invited me on. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to participate in that crap. It's not going to make a difference. Anything I need to say, you probably know by now, and you're not going to ask the tough questions anyway. You're just going to talk about Trump and elevate him in a way. Even if it feels like bad news, there's no such thing as bad news for Donald Trump. And he's now more powerful than he's ever been. And that should make everybody do some soul searching. And it will, because we got to do things differently. We got to have a real grassroots movement. There's a popular, political action group, bunch of young men. I did some videos for them. I've known them since the beginning. I told them years ago, you need to do meetups with your people. You need to get people on the ground, meeting up, being activists within their community, knocking on doors, doing some real, organic grassroots work. But there's more money in getting people to look at your YouTube page and all this kind of crap. So they didn't pursue that. Everybody's getting so famous and rich online that they considered that to be activism. It's not activism. It's entertainment. And if you like that and you consume it, more power to you. I'm not judging you, but like I said last time I went on this rant, don't kid yourself that it's making a difference. And unfortunately, Tuesday was a hard lesson in that. Last Tuesday, right? Because we got smoked from the beginning. And sure, people are like, oh, there's 10 million missing votes and all that. It doesn't matter. Even if that's true, it doesn't matter, because he had the appearance of victory so early that it was all over. That election was over by 9 o'clock, just like it was in 2016, where he had all this help from the Russians and stuff. And he had twice as much this time. And he had Elon Musk. And I wrote a Substack about, we had no way to measure that. There was no metric to measure what a billionaire walking around Pennsylvania giving away $1 million was going to do to the electorate. And now we can measure it. It was invaluable. He spent $130 million and made $6 billion overnight. The world's richest have made like $60 billion in the week since Trump was elected. So they spent pennies to them to make a fortune. And that's what Trump represented, and that's what we were up against. We were up against oligarchs. We were up against giant corporations. We were up against Wall Street in many ways. And we were up against, or we didn't have at our backs, we have the Washington Post and Jeff Bezos and his cowardice of pulling the endorsement for Kamala Harris. We had the LA Times did the same thing, I believe. They backed off. They hedged their bets, and it paid off. They're now going to make a lot of money. They're going to hope everybody reads the op-eds about how bad Trump is and stuff, and they're going to write articles on the outrage du jour, and they're going to send their reporters onto the news programs at night, which are basically podcasts at this point. It's the same panel discussion, the same people sitting there with their glasses talking about how bad Trump is and treating it out. Check me out on such and such's show at 8 p.m. Democracy Warriors. I'm sick of this shit, and you should be too. Okay? This isn't a game. People are going to suffer. I rode into New York City last night. I saw a woman who's retirement age, looked like she could have been a teacher or something in her day. Gray-haired woman pushing all of her possessions in a suitcase, with a cap on. It was cold, winter coat, walking up 8th Avenue with everything she owned in her golden years where she should be safely retired, And that's happening all over this country, and it's going to get horrible, right? Elon Musk is going to come in and cut $2 trillion out of the federal budget, where do you think that money is going to come from? It's going to come from Medicaid and Medicare. It's going to come from Social Security. It always comes from those places with the Republicans. That's the first thing they look at. They're not looking at the military because they want their defense contractor buddies to keep, buying missiles that the government orders up, And if you didn't like those bombs getting dropped on innocent people, which nobody likes, God forbid you haven't seen anything yet. And we faced all of that too. All of those protests that seemed to be without any real leadership, that were just sort of disruptive. I witnessed a lot of them. I was at a big Biden rally at Radio City in the spring, and it was coordinated. I sat in a row where somebody got up to protest, and they waited till their friend got the camera ready so they could videotape it and put it on TikTok later. And they were yelling down President Obama and Bill Clinton at a fundraiser for Democrats. I was like, do you guys want to lose this thing? Because we're gonna. And we did, right? Because that didn't help the perception of Democrats having any kind of leadership and any kind of authority. You were playing into Trump's hands, and I'm sure it was coordinated to do that. I'm sure it was funded for that very purpose. And I'm not making light of the suffering of the people of Gaza, which is very real. But, they also, like Hamas attacked Israel. And that was immediately sort of countered with this anti-Semitic kind of very well organized pushback on the left that created a lot of chaos. And now we got a real mess, right? Now you got a real mess on your hands because Trump and Netanyahu are thick as thieves. Netanyahu used to sleep in Jared Kushner's bed in New Jersey, not with Jared. Okay, but, that's just going to be condos now. You didn't protect democracy. You didn't protect innocent people. You handed, the election to somebody who has no thought about human rights. And that's not even to say what's going to happen in Ukraine. And don't come at me trolling like I don't care about, death and destruction. I do. I don't want to see any of it. I want it to end. But the world is an infinitely complicated place, and you need sober, serious people doing it, okay? And you had a bunch of kids trying to create a bunch of chaos, probably being funded by somebody on the right, and then it fomented a bunch of anti-Semitism, and all of that stuff played into Trump's hands. And now we're going to reap the results, and I'm pissed about it, and you should be pissed about it too, because you got played. We all did. We got played. And we had a lot against us, and we didn't really have that good, sort of a clear vision, right? I'm one guy. Nobody listens to this podcast. I appreciate the people that do, but I got half the listeners I do now when I started 3 years ago. The algorithm doesn't like me. I barely had 4,000 views on YouTube. A month ago it was 12,000, and that's nothing. I'll be a guest on somebody's podcast. They get 1 million views. It doesn't matter. It's not my point. I'm saying I'm one person shouting in the wind, with some loyal listeners who I love and appreciate the support. I'm not into this for a career. It's not my point. I'm saying whatever sense I'm making isn't getting out of there and isn't getting out there, rather, So we had a lack of a really cohesive vision in terms of strategy. I don't even want to go too deep into the influencer thing, but I was in some of these war rooms and they were always talking about these hashtags and oh, look, our hashtag got 100 billion impressions. And it never changed the fundamentals at all, right? But it made them feel and look like they were doing something. So then they can go to the people they're billing and say, see how effective we are? We got 100 million, impressions on your Dem Save Healthcare hashtag or whatever, right? So hire us again next time. And it didn't reach the people it needed to reach. And I don't know what the alternative is for that. And I understand why the White House leaned into it, but it wasn't an effective strategy. And if you look at any of this stuff, even the popular people on the left, their listenership pales in comparison with the right. It pales in comparison with a Joe Rogan or somebody like that and all these other hardcore right-wing podcasts and Trump did all of them, man. And they're all designed to appeal to 14-year-old dumbass boys, or 25-year-old white men or men of color, whatever. It doesn't matter anymore. It's a brand and it's toxic and masculine and dudes want a part of it because it seems to make you tough, and this irreverence, right? What we saw at that rally, that horrific rally, was like, that's what a comedy show looks like these days. If you go see these certain type of comedians, these MAGA types. One of them hosted SNL like a year ago. Some dude from Pennsylvania. I don't know his name. He was the guy who got fired. Can't stand the guy. Can't stand that kind of humor, because it's not humor. It's just dumbassery. It's bullying. And bullying is popular, and Trump is the ultimate bully, right? And his sidekick is Elon Musk, this snarky little billionaire whack job, with more money than sense, running around thinking he's running the government now. And I'll write more about him, because the behind-the-scenes stuff at Mar-a-Lago has got to be nuts at this point, because Trump doesn't like competition. He likes to be the big kid on the block. So that obviously they're going to run afoul of each other at a certain point. But what's Trump going to do? He's not going to kick him out of the kingdom, so to speak, because he needs him now. So there's a lot of complicated things. And those are all opportunities, right? Those are all opportunities for us to regroup and go at them hard. And that's what we have to do, because this isn't about fighting for your brand or promoting whatever thing you want to promote. This is about that old lady I talked about walking the streets of Manhattan in the cold. This is about the kids that are sitting on sidewalks that have been bussed here from Texas, in a political stunt by a backwards-ass governor who can now claim a mandate along with the president he follows. The bad guys won in a big way, and they're deeply seated into the corridors of power. And the corruption will be off the charts. We essentially are a kleptocracy now. It is all over but the shouting, in a way. And that's not to get you depressed. That's not to say we can't do anything about it, because we can and we will, okay? But we have to take a moment to heal. We have to sort of deepen our awareness of what really matters and how we reach people. And we have to do it on a human level. People didn't know what they were voting for in many ways. He was appealing to ignorance and a cultural iconography and branding that is so deep-seated. If you were 18 and you voted for Trump, you were 9 years old the last time he ran. You were a kid. And if you grew up in a house with a dad who watched Fox News and had a MAGA hat on the coat rack, then that was the iconography of your community. Just like if you grew up in Dallas and you saw Dallas Cowboys, shirts and T-shirts and hats everywhere, right? It was like you wanted to be like your old man. You want to be like your uncles and the guys you admire in your community. Trump knew that. He knew he was the tailgate president, as I said in Noel's notes, a recent one I wrote. He understands that. If he's good at anything, it's marketing. He's always been good at marketing. He's always had a house of cards. He's always had the shittiest casinos and the shittiest products, but he's always the loudest, most obnoxious guy out there. And that works in the world he occupies. And that world became much of the United States. We became a very stupid, undiscerning place as a generalization. I'm not saying everybody's like that. I'm talking about the masses, that bothered to show up to vote. A lot of people didn't even bother, which is a whole nother problem. And if your community is disrupted because he starts to do these, mass deportations, maybe next time you'll vote, And when we face that, we have to be unified, because we have to push back on that hard AF. Okay, we cannot accept that. That is not who we are. They're already trying to build prisons. They want to double the amount of prisons and build all these prison camps outside of cities to warehouse people, right? And I don't want to get too dark on you, but deportation is expensive, right? And after a while, there becomes cheaper options. And we've seen that happen in the world. In Germany, the Nazis wanted to deport all of the Jewish people at first, and it was really not economically possible, so they exterminate people, and if you think Trump wouldn't do that, you don't know Donald Trump. He is a psychopath. If you've listened to anything I've said in the last 3 years of doing this podcast, understand that. He is a sexual predator. He is a guy who gets off on beating up young girls. He is a very sick man. Had he not grown up rich and wealthy in Queens, had he been a poor kid in the Bronx, he would have been dead or in jail by the time he's 21, because somebody else's brother or dad would have killed him or the cops would have thrown his ass in jail. But he was rich and he got away with it. And he sought out the other predators and the other pedophiles. And Jeffrey Epstein had a whole industry, had a compromat factory on East 71st Street, a townhouse where rich guys would show up to abuse women. I know a girl who was in it. And guess what? The guy who's head of his transition team, Howard Lutnick, owned the townhouse next door to Epstein, and he bought it from a transaction that was brokered by Jeffrey Epstein's brother. Okay, so he was knee deep in all that. He's the guy who started holding fundraisers for Trump. In May of 19, a couple months before Epstein got popped, and he had Steve Wynn, Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani. He had all these guys come to his townhouse, and they ponied up like $20 million. And my theory was, hey, Epstein's in the wind. It could be a problem. Bill Barr's going to take care of it. Pony up. We get Trump reelected. It doesn't happen, right? And we all know what Bill Barr stepped in and did with Jeffrey Epstein. He had him whacked in a federal, in MCC. There's no question in my mind. You'll never know the answers to that now because they got away with it in the first term. Trump obviously didn't win the election in 2020, tried to burn down the Capitol, tried to hand his vice president, or hand his vice president over to a mob that was going to hang him. And he got away with it. He wasn't held accountable properly for that. Yeah, we had hearings, which again became a big publicity affair, and we all breathlessly watched them in the summertime. And what happened? Nothing. You had Merrick Garland waiting 2 years to bring, to appoint a special prosecutor. He waited until 4 days after Trump announced he was running again. The dude tried to burn down the Capitol 2 years ago. You don't wait 2 years to appoint a special counsel because, as I said the whole time is not on your side. Trump is a master of tying up the courts and manipulating the courts. He's done it his whole life. He was involved with 4,000 lawsuits before he became president. He hires guys. They're, unscrupulous lawyers. They're now going to be working for him. His second in charge is going to be the deputy AG. I can't think of the guy's name, but the guy who defended him in the E. Jean Carroll trial and I believe the other Manhattan trial. So Trump gets loyalists around him. He's putting them in positions of government. It's the most venal, corrupt cast of characters we've ever had in D.C., and that's saying something, right? Because there's been some real lowlifes on both sides of the aisle in politics before. You've never seen anything like this. I guarantee you the guy you disrespected the most was much more of a traditionalist than Trump is. He makes Richard Nixon look like, an honorable man, and of course he wasn't, So it's a lot. It's a lot to process. And my advice to you is you don't take it all at once, right? You got to take baby steps. That's how you climb a mountain, one step at a time. And we got a mountain in front of us now. That's essentially we fell off a cliff Tuesday, and now we're down in the valley, and we got to dust ourselves off. We got to, keep hiking up the trail, but we got to pick a different route because that last route didn't work. We didn't have good grips for our hands, and we fell when we got near the top. Because the other guy's throwing shit down on us as we're climbing. That's what lies are. When somebody's willing to lie like he did after the hurricanes in North Carolina, which, by the way, one of my listeners ordered a T-shirt from Black Mountain, North Carolina, and it got returned to sender. And it just, I think of it every day. I hope she's okay. I won't say her name, to protect her privacy, but it got sent back to me. Obviously, I refunded the money, but I just, I sent an email with the contact information I had. I want you to know I'm thinking about you, and I hope it worked out. But, that's mind-blowing to me, that cities were washed away in Appalachia, right? And Trump lied about it in the days after and said Biden wasn't helping anybody. That worked. That information got out of there. Right? He won that state. That was a swing state. He won all 7 of them. The worst case scenario. And yes, he probably cheated 100 different ways to Sunday, but you're not going to catch him now. It doesn't matter, essentially. I mean, it does, but it doesn't because you can't do anything about it. He now has the power. When we had the power, we didn't do anything about it. The first thing we needed to do was hold him accountable after January 6th. A sane government would have arrested him on January 21st. You would have had an AG who would have walked into DOJ and said, hey, if Trump appointed you, put up your hand right now. And everybody put up their hand. Okay, you're out of here. You're fired. Get rid of all the loyalists. Get rid of all the holdovers. Start over. Build from the ground up, with the implicit marching orders that that guy tried to usurp democracy, and that cannot happen ever again. And we're going to overturn every rock we have to and throw everybody in jail we have to who was that treasonous. We not only did that, he didn't get held accountable for stealing classified documents. He stole documents and kept them in his toilet in Mar-a-Lago and got away with it because the judge he had appointed was like, no, Trump's my guy. He appointed me, Eileen Cannon, and just stalled and obfuscated, and the case sort of died on the vine like everything else did. Now Jack Smith is shutting everything down. Hopefully he'll release a report, but it'll probably, be like the Mueller report, which Bill Barr obfuscated about and lied about its contents, and everybody else didn't get to read it for another 5 weeks or whatever. And it was already in the news cycle that there was no Russian collusion, which was not true. But he said it to benefit Trump, and the lie stuck. Again, whoever lies the loudest wins. That's how this stuff works. And we're in an ecosphere that rewards lying. It rewards clicks. Anybody shouldn't be able to say anything, anybody shouldn't be able to say anything to everybody. That's my new mantra, right? Allowing everybody to have a YouTube page and a Twitter page in the beginning seemed like a great idea. But now we're getting the results of it, and it's not really a great idea. We let something out of the bag that we have no idea the power of. It's like nuclear power, right? The fact that anybody can get on there and lie day and night, and it can reach impressionable minds, can change the face of the world, and it has. It's changed the personality of this country. All this racist crap, all this right-wing crap, all this TikTok influencer bullshit is affecting young people. It's affecting young men, and they think Trump is a good guy. They don't think anything of January 6th. Most people forgot about it. How the F do you forget about it? It was 4 years ago, right? That should have been the most offensive thing that ever happened in your eyes as an American. And instead, you rewarded the guy. We live in a country that rewarded him. That's your sobering wake-up call. How stupid are these fucking people? And I know a lot of them. They're really stupid. They're nice people and they mean well, but they're really not sophisticated. Not culturally, not intellectually. They're not getting real information. They're watching Fox News for a half an hour and then switching over to the ball game. And they're listening to Sean Hannity or some snarky Jesse Waters frat bro tell them some bullshit about how Biden's all feeble and everything, and they're buying it, And obviously Biden did mess up in the debate and was feeble, right? But you didn't need every podcast bro in the Democratic Party to immediately throw him under the bus and write op-eds against him. That's why I was screaming about that, because I think the damage it was doing to the Democratic Party was going to make us lose in November, and we lost in November. And that's not to take anything away from Kamala Harris. I think she did a wonderful job and ran a great campaign, but it was sort of too little too late. The damage was already done because there was so much infighting in our party and so much, let's just throw this guy over. And it was manipulated behind the scenes by Nancy Pelosi. I saw it. I'm in a chat room with one of her strategist guys. It was just a DC kind of swamp creature type, but she clearly wanted Governor Newsom. She didn't want Kamala. So they got like half of their wish. And that is what kind of hamstrung the party. Had you done that 2 years ago, had you been honest about it, you might have had a chance, right? And Biden obviously shouldn't have sought a second term. He should have been one and done, which is what he said he was going to do originally. And obviously changed his mind, and that history won't be kind to that. It'll be kind to his presidency, but clearly that wasn't the right move. We should have had a primary a long time ago. We couldn't have done a primary in July when he dropped out, because that would have been just even more of a disaster. I think from the moment he dropped out and endorsed Vice President Harris, we did the right thing as a party, and there was a lot of enthusiasm and stuff, but the messaging was in that trap. So much of it was on TikTok, and that wasn't going to go anywhere. And a lot of people were knocking on doors in Pennsylvania, and a lot of people put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this election, and I'm not making light out of any of it. Volunteers were showing up. It's still inexplicable to me that we did as poorly as we did. And that could have something to do with some kind of malfeasance and cheating, of which, a lot of that stuff has been going on forever. And we have to find the stomach to have those conversations and investigate that stuff. And I don't want anybody who, spent some shoe leather on this campaign to be disheartened and checking out. I know a lot of people are. Check out of the consuming, rage farming. Check out of 15 hours of cable news every day, which I've done for 9 years. Check out of that stuff, but don't check out of connecting what you believe in your soul, what you believe to be right, and the policies and principles that you want your party to bring forward into our government. Don't check out on that. Recommit to that. Just find a different way to go about it, and don't. It's about the many, not the few, right? And Democrats get very elitist. You have elitist influencers, elitist leaders, and we don't need that. We need anonymous kind of people that are willing to hey, this isn't about me, but I'm going to show up and march. I'm going to knock on these doors. I'm going to do the right thing, right? We don't need any more stars. There's such a narcissism that's gone through our politics. It's permeated everything. Everybody wants to be an influencer. Everybody wants to be, the number one at whatever and famous right away. I want to help other people. That's what you should want to do. That's the only thing that's going to give you meaning in life, is being of service to others. And I'm not saying being a rock star is bad or being an actor. Obviously, people have to know who you are to make a living at your chosen thing, right? But making a living at politics used to mean moving to D.C. and working on policy, or writing about it in a clear, sober fashion. Now it's just I'm the number one influencer at 21 years old. I'm going to deliver such and such. None of them delivered anything. I saw these little narcissists all the time. None of them delivered shit. They all got their selfies and they all did their thing and they all made their little TikToks and their videos, and they learned a valuable lesson, hopefully, that it takes more than that to actually reach people. And it takes, a clear-eyed vision of what we're up against. And I'm not trying to belittle their efforts. I applaud them. I applaud their involvement. It's all healthy. It's just not being, focused the right way. Because what we're attempting to counter, the mouthpiece that the right-wing media controls, both in mainstream media on, things like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, who's no friend of democracy. Don't kid yourself about Threads or Facebook. There's a reason he tamped down all the political content on Threads when it got popular a year ago. He didn't want that stuff on there because it was going to help Trump. That's why Elon Musk bought Twitter, in 2020. Because he knew we lost the midterms, because when we were home during the pandemic, everybody was on there and they were sharing information. And we saw the protests against George Floyd. We saw all the crazy stuff Trump was doing. We learned about him trying to want to shoot protesters and all this stuff. And people were like, no. And then they essentially dismantled it, but he allowed the people who were making money off it to continue to make money off it. And that created an illusion, right? That you were still being effective because you were getting all these likes and everything, but you weren't affecting the change you needed to affect. We were putting all of our eggs in one basket, and that basket was faulty. It had a big old hole in the bottom, and all the eggs came out on Tuesday night. Okay? So we rebuild. We understand that, and we have to figure out what to do instead. And I don't have that answer. I'm not going to claim I do, and I'm not saying everybody needs to stop speaking out. You need to speak out even more. You need to write that Substack. You need to keep saying what you want to say and speaking towards peace and justice, right? But we need to make sure it's reaching people. And I don't understand how to completely do that. I'm going to try to reorient myself and revisit some of the projects I used to do. The environments didn't get enough attention in the last election. I think people were like, let's just get across the finish line, and then we'll deal with stuff. And we had cataclysmic storms happening all the time. And Trump was able to use it to his advantage from the lies that I just mentioned, which in many ways, that's when I felt like we were most in trouble. That Monday, when the Democrats hadn't foreseen him flying down to Georgia and doing that little stunt, and they were sort of, Vice President Harris and Biden were really nowhere to be found. They weren't going to fly into a disaster zone because it would have taken away resources from the recovery effort. They did the right thing. Trump wasn't going to do the right thing, and somebody should have known he wasn't going to do the right thing. Mitch Landrieu or somebody should have said, let's get ahead of him. Let's get somebody down there. Just get the vice president in Atlanta. Get ahead of his little presser. But we didn't, and he got that press conference, and that ate up the news cycle for a week. And it made the people in the region obviously endangered because then they weren't accepting FEMA help. And you had militant groups roaming around, and they all moved in on that situation. So the guys who were against climate change used it to their advantage, the disasters caused by climate change. And the party that actually wants to do something about it, the president that had the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act had a lot of climate policy in it. And I think the Inflation Act did too. There was a lot of good things that he was trying to do, and it wasn't getting, the attention that it deserved. And the messaging was obviously very wonky. And Vice President Harris had to play politics. I'm into fracking now. And, that never really sat right. Like, fracking is bad, dude. That's just bad news. So is drilling for oil. It's a necessary evil. We're going to do it. Nobody's saying we got to shut it down overnight, but don't pretend like it's a good thing. We might do better to lean into the left and lean into the progressive stuff and the sanity of environmental legislation. Which leads me to another thing, whereas a lot of people are talking about like, oh, we need to reorient our messaging and be more like them, kind of, be less woke. No, that's not the answer. You don't give up on your principles because you lost. You find another way to deliver the truth. As long as truth and justice are on your side, you don't have to change that. We don't have to turn against transgender Americans and minorities and women and all this kind of stuff to be more like them because they were successful in their anti-woke messaging. They were successful in that messaging because it appeals to dumbasses. It appeals to people with the mentality of a 14-year-old dude. That it was adolescents. This country is full of adolescents walking around in grown men's bodies, going home, playing video games. Every freaking movie you watch is a comic book hero, come to life. Like, that's all well and good. I'm not shaming it. It's a form of entertainment. But like I always say, you need other kind of richer cultural experiences that let you learn about other people, that challenge you. It's hard to read a book. It's hard to sit through a ballet or something. It's very elitist and very expensive to have access to it, and it shouldn't be that way. There should be theaters in every neighborhood. Every town I drive through has an abandoned theater in it. They're all over this country, especially in the Northeast. I've traveled everywhere in this country, on the road and on tour. And a lot of those theaters, Fox theaters and stuff, have been renovated and have concerts, and they're beautiful. They're the monuments we built in this country, in my opinion. We had the greatest theaters in the world. They would show movies back in the day and vaudeville and stuff. They're there. The bones are still there. That's what we need to lean into. When I drive up through Massachusetts and all these kind of like Connecticut, there's some forgotten kind of areas in the Northeast, old factory towns that are kind of, they're hanging on, but they're not populated like they once were. And they're these beautiful old towns, red brick towns, and they always have that theater. And I'll drive by one, and I'll be like, I'll bet it's beautiful inside. I'll bet if you renovated that, it would be a viable business. We need that. We need like a folk revival, so to speak. I came out of that movement in many ways. I grew up going to the Clearwater Revival, the festival that Pete Seeger founded to clean up the Hudson. I got to work with Pete many times. He meant a lot to me in my life. I didn't know him well, but I have some moments with him that I'll cherish and some big gigs, as I've talked about. I did the Obama's rally with him, and when he was honored in the Kennedy Center and his 90th birthday party, Pete would be out there singing songs. He would have written 15 songs about this, And when I started comedy, by the way, I'd always written songs, as you guys know, and when he got elected The first time I was like, I need to do stand-up. Like, it's going to take too long to write a song and get it out to people. I just need to write jokes in real time and go at them with the stuff I was revealing, which was all true. Everything you heard about him was true, which means it's still true, which means he's still sniffing Adderall. He's still, ruling from a place of active addiction, which is the last thing you want in a leader, because he's only thinking about himself, and he's motivated by fear and resentment and rage, the last things you want in a leader, right? Sobriety is an emotional place, even more than a chemical-free place, so to speak, and he's got none of it. No emotional sobriety, no moral compass. It's the worst case scenario, right? But all that stuff I said about his personality is true, and it's only gotten worse because addiction is a progressive disease, so you get worse, right? But the reason I went into comedy, because it was an easier way to express that stuff, and I'll do some more shows and, write a new set about that kind of stuff. But, I want to, start, writing more songs again. And I want other people to do that. You have to respond to this with art, with paintings. I spent all day in a gallery yesterday in Manhattan looking at some of the greats. It was the Phillips Gallery contemporary art show for this big auction that's coming up. And, Warhol and Basquiat and Ed Ruscha, all these, goes on and on. Milton Avery, all these great artists. And they had Picasso's there. They didn't have Guernica, but Guernica comes to mind, right? One of the most famous paintings in the world was his response to fascism in Spain and in Germany, we're back there. This is your moment, This is like a pre-World War II era, and hopefully we won't slip into World War III, but we have to respond with humanity. And the greatest, easiest way to get people to respond to their own humanity is through storytelling, is through art. And I say storytelling broadly. Songs are storytelling, movie is storytelling, films, videos, podcasts. All right, there's a lot of good in all this technology. As I rant on it for 40 minutes, I'm also aware of the blessing of giving everybody a voice. The question becomes, how do you use that voice? Do you do it to please the algorithm? Do you use Trump's photo because you'll get more likes if you do, because everybody's going to want to click on it to see what horrible thing he said? Or do you put your own, image that means something to you in its place? Right? And I paint all these watercolors and stuff. You don't do that to be famous. I do it to thank the world for what it's giving me. I look at a view so beautiful and a tree so beautiful holding so much wisdom, and I'm like, let me just focus on you. Because what will it do for me inside when I focus my attention and my awareness on something that is seemingly outside of myself, separate from me, a tree, right? What it does is it changes your inner reality, and you realize you're not that separate at all from the tree, and your nature experiencing itself in that moment when you're creating something that wasn't there before. That it's truthful about the moment that you're living in. It doesn't matter how good it is. You don't have to be, you don't have to be Basquiat, right? You don't have to be Picasso. You don't have to be Michelangelo, It'd be nice if you are. Sell me some of your work early if you find yourself in possession of such talent. Great talent is really just telling the truth, right? It's developing the innate skills and, the things that sort of come easy for you and make you feel most alive when you're doing them, and then honoring that by working incredibly hard and having a lot of discipline about what you do. When I went to drama school, that's what I learned. Everybody had a certain measure of talent to get into the school I went into, got into. American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, by the way. Very proud of having graduated from there. But when you got there, you realized, hey, you have to honor your talent. You have to honor this art form. You have to rise to the occasion and be the best version of yourself you can be if you think if you want the privilege of walking on a stage. And that's how I always feel it. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to talk to you guys. It's a privilege that you listen to me. And I don't take it lightly. I don't take it for granted. And when I'm not doing a show and there's a big break, and I'll try to do them more regularly, but when there's a break, it's this, I don't want to vent my spleen on you. I'm going to do that anyway, as you just heard. Anger and stuff is going to come out, but I wasn't going to, do a show the next day and just freak out on you for an hour, because that's not going to help you. Because I'm doing this to inspire myself. I'm doing this to connect with, with you guys in a way that I would connect with a tree or a pond when I'm sitting there painting it, or I'm playing my guitar. I'm doing it to kind of be as deeply in the moment as I can be and reflect the truth I feel inside myself, right? And somebody else might connect to something and they might go out and do something. Like, people listen to this podcast and they tell me they listen to it when they're painting or when they're doing laundry or whatever, walking in nature. That's what it's for, That's what we're here for. We're here to help each other. Look at a dog, man. Look into a dog's eyes or a cat's eyes. They're always attentive. They're always in the moment. They're always right there with you. We spend a lot of time not deeply in the moment, especially with modern life and all this connection, right? All these devices that make us feel connected. And in many ways, we've never been further apart, because we're coming apart at the seams as a nation. We don't have a cohesiveness. We're divided. And a bunch of us, not the listeners to this podcast and certainly not me, they voted for the worst guy ever. They rewarded him for horrible behavior. Even his whole messaging was just, talking about himself and dissing the United States. And now people are going to suffer real world consequences because of it. And hopefully we can stop the worst of it, which is the last thing I'll leave you with, is that the worst things haven't happened yet. Yes, they're on course to happen, and don't give him the benefit of the doubt on anything. But he hasn't deported anybody yet. And when that stuff starts to happen, we got to stand up. We got to figure out what to do. And I'll be back well before then with my thoughts. But we can't allow that to happen. That's not who we are. We're not going to have some, National Guard roaming our cities, pulling people off the streets and separating families. You don't want to separate a kid from his parents, 40 years ago this month, my mom was separated from me, law enforcement came in and took her away, left me in a dark apartment, and I still feel that pain and isolation. And, she had no choice. She had broken the law and was going to prison, and that's where she went, but I remember what that felt like in my bones, and I still carry that with me, So think of some innocent 5-year-old who's already in a strange land, or everything he knows in his life is around him, and he's going to school, and he comes home from school, and, there's a van, in the driveway, and they're bringing his mom and dad out in handcuffs, and he's got to get in the back too, or he's got to stay without his parents, or get thrown into some detention center, or cage. They threw kids in cages last time. That's a deep shame on our nation's conscience that we're going to have to live with forever. We don't want more of that. They did enough of it the first time. We can't let them do any more. But we're not there yet, okay? So I don't want to get ahead of myself. I think this is a good place to end. I just wanted to come back and let you guys know I love you. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate all the support. I know how hard this is. Take as much time as you need. This is a time for healing. It's that time of year where the clock's changed and it's getting cold out. Take that time. Read a good book. Make a fire. Make a meal that you enjoy. Self-care is a real thing, and you got to be strong, for what's ahead. You got to take care of yourself first. You got to put your own gas mask on first, Thanks for listening. I'll be back soon, I promise. You can find me at noelcasler.com, Noel's Notes on Substack. I'm on that Blue Sky now as Noel Casler. You can become a member of this podcast on Patreon, and you can listen to it commercial free if that interests you. It's $5 a month. Thanks for everybody who signed up for that. You can support it on YouTube as well and be a member of the page. Tell your friends, share it, If you like the message I send, help more people hear it, because I guess that's, I kind of didn't mind that it wasn't super popular, but obviously my little message isn't getting out there enough, and I'd like it to, because maybe I can influence somebody who has, has a bigger audience or something. So most importantly, just take care of yourself. Don't consume too much of this insanity. Don't fall for the show of it, because we got real work to do. All right? I love you guys. Namaste. Peace.